right, ebusuafo yamamuni na makwaba mama chin eba Ghana Politics Avenue, GH Politics Avenue. Ahana open all the trending political stories in Ghana on Sabi to me akan na and the story the bring say eye da fiada itwemu ana Ghana yamam pani His Excellency John Dramani Mahama at the State of the Nation address first quarter 2026 year ebedum oman Ghana na this answer me be true ana our unravel conversations around all the major political talk shows and will be di hu komo be kan ho asem na no memendano ewo TV3 key points so and a government spokesperson Iwura honorable Felix Prǒsěcutiǒn na was I be man say bidwane di ma asebu kwa man kese e dey sembe betutu just NPP for kase aban we the corruption man for US can ba power nanso mo ba yakokọ ba kro mo nchi bi ena obechirum se ena so ba no akokọ ba mo nchi bi no mo ba no no mo ma to de emra eni pepepe yo na ye adwuma na sisi a oni ye kasai NPP appointees mako wo ha eye 100 ena ejina court ani mu 15 kura de enche ye omo be kwa afiase be jeli omo enti amamfo kase ora no enya adwuma onto o mase omo nim de ekoso na omo nim de ekoso a anka ombo ba man ba se o twe amanfo aso ana o hwe se omo diska bia no ye beji nje ne former NPP appointees emu 100 ene gina assemblea bia no a omo yiyo omo ho no fasika bia afa omo nsase na mu 15 krado o masem ne ye ka wi ama omako afia so this ansem YouTube o TV3 key points memenda etwa mu wa abra no mo discuss ora any State of the Nation addresser Excellency John Dramani Mahama de betu do me nko ti ni wa abra this ansem YouTube I Ghana Politics Avenue open the trend podcast so I na be
no, I beg you. You see, first of all, again, you see, Alfred, let me put it on record. When we promised oral, nobody in the NDC, including President Mahama, said we were going to use extrajudicial means. We were never going to tie people to the stake and shoot them.
They said we were going to.
We were not. No, listen.
Tribunals.
Listen. Yeah, but the tribunal is lawful. Tribunal is in the constitution. Indeed,
so
I sat in. Listen. I sat in cabinet. Cabinet approved it. So the tribunals are coming back. They are lawful. They are. It's in the 1992 constitution. Yeah. So if a tribunal is set up and I'm dragged before it, it is lawful activity. What we never said was that we're going to tie people to the. So Kabiru is alleged to have stolen this phone. Then I come and drag him in the middle of the night from side, tie him to a stake and shoot him. Is that what oral is about? No. Oral is about due process. And as I speak to you, there are over 100 former appointees who have been dragged before investigative bodies. Yeah. Some of them are on bail, as I speak to you, including very high-profile personalities in the party. Yet they go through all this and then they turn around and come and tell you that oral is doing nothing. And as Martin said, there are 15 people standing trial as I speak. As I speak to you, in some of the cases, the Attorney General has finished making his case. But you see, due process is necessary so that I don't unfairly target Zato because he's MPP.
Right.
That simply because I don't like him, I fabricate charges against him, drag him to court to waste his time. So the court system is put in place to ensure that the state is not able to do that. And it protects all of us. There will never be a time, for as long as we remain under constitutional governance, that any government can act extrajudicially and young people and punish them because they have been accused. You must go through due process, and that is what we are doing. We have never said that there was any other way to pursue. It is operation recover or loot. How do you recover the loot? You have to be convicted by a court of the crime before you forfeit the property which is believed to have been the proceeds of the crime, or which, if disposed of, can help recover the resources that you are alleged to have stolen. That is what we promise, and that is precisely what we are delivering.
Thank you. Dr. Kabir Mahama.
I think yes, so I'll try to make it brief. One,
precisely.
The measure of oral is to recover some 2-1.
There are also a few people who do rent seeking. And so, despite the clear reduction in the factors that account for pricing, they either maintain or run to jack it up. There's no basis for it, especially if you are an importer, because the value or the amount of CD you need to import has reduced because of the appreciation of the currency. And then when you bring in the imports, the duty that is charged you, which is indexed to the dollar, has also reduced. So there's no basis. I have heard some of them say that they suffered immensely under the NPP and that they incurred huge losses when the NPP destroyed the economy. And so perhaps they think that now is the time to make some recovery. And that's why they have been reluctant to reduce some items. True. Now, whenever we say this, the NPP says, oh, this is an inherited policy. they claim that we have rebranded
Yes.
a policy that they claim was called Gold for Reserve by Bawumia.
Yeah.
First of all, and I spoke about a comical artifice. You see, they dressed the man up in borrowed clothing.
How? What
In one breath, they say this man had nothing to do with the Ghanaian economy. He was not in charge. And that all the negatives about the economy had nothing to do with him. Yet, the same man who was not in charge was able to impose what they say was their flagship economic policy at the time, Gold for Reserve. After, it doesn't make sense to you. So they don't attract much credibility towards the man by that narrative. Because the man cannot be in charge at one time and not be in charge at the same time. It is an untenable, illogical argument. Number two, to say that Bawumia is the brainchild behind Gold for Reserve, you must mean two things. Either that in the whole world, no central bank had gold reserves as part of their strategy to defend their currency, or that it was the first time in Ghana's history that the central bank had gold reserves. Both claims are false. Look, for 3 centuries, as far back as 1694, the Bank of England has had gold reserves. Indeed, they hold the world's largest gold reserves, if I'm not mistaken. Only last week, Sky TV was allowed into the Bank of England votes. They counted 22,000 gold bars kept in that one of their votes under the streets of London. They even keep gold bars from other countries for them. So the principle or idea that central banks keep gold is not novel. It is at least 3 centuries old. Unless they say Bawumia is like the Highlander. He has lived for 3 centuries. It was around in 1694 to propose this. I don't see how this is tenable. Number two, even in Ghana, the first time we had gold for reserve was in 1961 under Kwame Nkrumah. Before the NPP came to power, there were 8 tons of gold in the votes. Sorry, there were 8 tons of gold belonging to the Central Bank of Ghana, the Bank of Ghana. Indeed, Alfred, to put it in context, when you say 8 tons, it is not small. It means 8,000 kilograms of gold. That is what the Central Bank had. Then, between 2021 and 2022, they said they added 20 or 22 tons. When we came, we added another 10 tons. You understand me? So it is not true that having gold as part of the reserves is Bawumia's idea, because it existed as far back as 3 centuries ago, 300 years ago.
Okay.
And then in Ghana, it was not the first time that we've had gold in our reserves. Number 3, what was even the purpose of having a ramp up in gold under the NPP? 2 things had happened. Because of their distraction of the economy, people had spirited out their investments, especially those who were abroad and were investing in our country. Normally what they do is that when they invest in our bonds, when the maturity is due, they roll over. But since 2021, when they noticed a decline in the economy, they started pulling out their money. Indeed, the Bank of Ghana itself says that over a 2-3 year period, up to $6 billion was spirited out of this country by investors. So they had depleted our reserves to a point where they didn't have money to give to importers of crude oil. And it was going to pose a problem. So what they did was that they put in place a very opaque arrangement. They bought gold, gave it to an intermediary, who then went to sell it and use it to buy crude oil and bring it. That's what they call the gold for oil. It was born out of necessity because they had depleted the reserves. If they had reserves in dollars in the Bank of Ghana, they would not need to go and do any gold for oil programming. The other point is that if indeed this was such a novel policy, how is it that they started doing this in 2021? And yet, at the time they were doing it in 2021, the cedi was at 5 cedis to $1. Meanwhile, by the time they left office, it had gone to around 15 to 16 cedis. So what was the effect of that policy? So it was a useless policy that was just decorating the walls of government. It had no effect on anything. You say you are such a genius, you are bringing a policy to defend the currency. Yet the more gold you piled, the more our currency depreciated and imposed hardships on the people of Ghana. As far back as 2020, we had proposed a gold board, and the gold board is a unique arrangement. What happens is that the gold that we produce, a significant part of it is not accounted for. People smuggle it, and it ends up in Dubai and India and other places. So we said as far back as 2020 that when we win power, we will establish the gold board as the sole authority to market and export gold, and that you cannot engage in that, especially in the artisanal and small scale sector, without recourse to the gold board. So because of that, they've put in place measures to curb smuggling. And so you have seen a corresponding ramp up in the amount of gold exported. In 2024, under the NPP, 63 tons of gold were exported. Yeah. Last year, Gold Board exported 103 tons of gold, which brought in $10 billion, which the Bank of Ghana used to intermediate in the market and keep the cedi stable. And at a level that made it comfortable for the people of Ghana to be able to buy things cheaper than they did under the NPP. Why, Alfred? You have a car. There was a time under the NPP when you bought diesel for 23 cedis a gallon. Today, that is not the case. When you go to the same filling station, you buy it for much cheaper. Why is that? Because one of the factors, the cedi, has substantially reduced. That even if there is a marginal increase in the world market price of crude oil, it balances off and it makes it cheaper than. Indeed, since we've been in power, fuel prices have dropped for 13 consecutive times. That has had an effect on inflation. So for 13 straight months, inflation has reduced from 23% to 3.8%. So the NPP must stop this habit of giving undeserved credit to Bawumia in order to package him for electoral purposes. That narrative failed at the election because people didn't buy it. You cannot insult people's intelligence. You cannot tell me that the man who was the head of the economic management team was not in charge of the economy and that the depreciation of the dollar was not his fault. Rising inflation was not his fault. Debt default was not his fault. At the same time, he was in charge of the economy such that he can impose a so-called gold for reserve policy on the government to implement. It does not tally, does not make any sense, it is completely illogical, and it insults the intelligence of the people. Since we've been in power, we have taken steps that everybody can attest to. In fact, it is actually...
Gold revenue, export revenue,
absolutely.
$21 billion,
Absolutely.
over $21 billion
absolutely.
in 2025.
You see, so what happens is that part of it goes into the reserves of the Bank of Ghana. Now they say that, oh, the Bank of Ghana has even sold 18 tons of gold.
Yes.
And therefore there's something... Alfred, there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
What happens is this, that is, gold is a volatile commodity. Its price fluctuates. Indeed, in the immediate aftermath of Trump's invasion of Venezuela, it went up. Then 2 or 3 weeks later, it's reduced by 5% in price. So it does that all the time. Therefore, if you hold significant reserves in gold, you must manage and diversify your portfolio such that if there's a sudden precipitous decline in the price of gold, you don't lose out, especially when the world market price has hit a certain level. Yes. So the Bank of Ghana merely diversified. Number 2, it's not like they went to sell the gold and gave the money to government to spend as part of its budget. They sold the gold and kept the proceeds in their reserves. So now our reserves is around $13.8 billion. Indeed, when the finance minister launched GANRAP, he says that he wants to ensure that now we leave import cover of 5.7 months to 15 months. When that happens, our currency is protected for a sustainably long period so that the fluctuations that we suffer, which leads to spiraling cost of living, which imposes suffering on the Ghanaian, is abated.
Now, I'm going to come to Dr. Kabiru on one point, but you see, the $10 billion that you referenced that the Bank of Ghana pumped into the forex market to sustain the value of the cedi, as a result of what we saw with this, the amount of export revenue that gold brought in, over 21 billion. How sustainable will it be in terms of the interventions by the central bank in the forex market, especially because the IMF has advised that it reduces its footprints in interventions?
What happens is that the worry of people like the IMF and other observers and economists is when you burn your reserves for the purposes of sustaining your currency. Indeed, that is the reason why the NPP couldn't do the same, because they didn't have adequate dollars. They had about $8.3 billion in it, but it was not enough to do any serious intermediation. In fact, the IMF actually put a curb on them that they can't do that because they needed to guarantee capacity to repay our debt in dollars when the time is due, so that we don't go back into the situation where they didn't have forex and they have to scramble around for it. So the IMF actually prevented them from doing so. The IMF also said that when we came to power, within that year, we should add up to $400 million to our reserve. We had added 1.4 billion, 1 billion more that the IMF wanted us to do. So we had excess. Now, if you have excess and reserves are secure, you don't have to bend through it. And yet, there's a currency which needs to be protected against fluctuation and rapid depreciation, which has a direct deleterious effect on the livelihoods of people. It is the right thing to do. What matters is that you should have a sustainable way of obtaining the foreign exchange for that purpose. So what Bank of Ghana does is that it is intermediation. The commercial banks want dollars, so they give cedis to the Bank of Ghana. The Bank of Ghana gives same to Gold Board to purchase gold. When Gold Board sells, they bring the dollars. The Bank of Ghana then gives it to those who had come to buy the forex in the first place. Now, you ask a question about how sustainable it is. That is why the finance minister, with such foresight, has gone to Parliament to say that now that we have a good price for gold, let us build what he calls an economic war chest. So if you have sufficient reserves, such that you get to a point where you have 15 months of import cover. Mind you, the standard really is around 3 months of import cover. In fact, for a long time in our history, the standard that we used to apply was 3 months. If you have 3 months of import cover, you are covered. Now we have 2.7 months more. If you have 50, you have 12 months more, a year's worth of import cover more than the minimum that you require. That gives you room in the days when the commodity price falls. Mind you, it is not only gold that gives us, what do you call it, forex reserves. Indeed, the most sustainable way, organic way, is through exports of commodities. In fact, non-traditional exports have increased by 47% in the last year or so. There's also oil, and then there's gold, which we just discussed. You understand me? But you see, in between the time that you fully industrialize, to have a strong export base, you must have mechanisms that protect you against the depreciation. And I must reiterate that the depreciation, as Bawumia himself attests, is the biggest problem of this economy if you set aside unsustainable debt.
Right.
And any government that has a handle on it and is able to ensure that the currency is stable such that it does not affect prices to the detriment of citizens deserves credit, as we have done.
Well, I pose these questions because government would have to answer them.
What for these
Dr. Kabir, we're seeing these 3 commodities, just 3 of them, accounting for about 80% of our export revenue, what we have seen over the period. And this administration's policy is to leverage this gold to ensure that the currency is sustained. I recall before the presentation of the budget last year, you had indicated that the macroeconomic indicators we are seeing trending towards the right direction is one worth commending. Sustainability is the question that you asked at the time, is it not? Do you get an answer to that with what you have heard today?
Well, so before coming to your answer, there are several scurrilous points being made regarding what Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia said, and to the effect that Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia cannot be seen to be taking credit. And they anchor that particular argument on the fact that acquisition of gold for reserves or keeping our gross international reserve in gold.
All right, it's here for them. We are some Jibre, and I'm going to say, I see them. Ghana Politics Avenue, the trending podcast service in Ghana. Na onsa ebekano. Some may be too dry and some are Eura. Honorable Felix Fusquacha, government spokesperson, or a buying Casamafo. I was our MP, a Sabu Kwaman, can sit in a distance and betray just said. Or more a house my Mobia our former appointees no Munabote. Now you see only a Casanipa 100 and a Ginasum DB move 15 grad enche on the Fiasi na or Marco 7 centers. Into video bedroom no any you was in Ghana Police 7 and then they can batch an issue. I would my best was obey like Obe subscribe to channel now face so notification bell no I don't know what was about say a video we. Any video of will be at Babadum be and Sabit Macan in time. Have a video at Badum when you want to like in what sham of first when you be. Actually, you know, like in what sham of first when you be. Now, if you comment section, let us know what you think. Now, Indian and Babaye, in a send you comments or comment section. Now, in how small way, what we will do to improve our Ghanaian politics and democracy. The Damuna Master Samaj Bremati, I Ghana Police 7 Yakram.